I got The Witcher Old World about 2 weeks ago, and I've been playing the heck out of it ever since. So what are my thoughts about this game, one of my most anticipated games of 2023? Let's talk about it. Before diving any further into this video, I just want to let you guys know that I think The Witcher Old World is a fantastic game. I absolutely love it, and my thoughts overall about this game are going to be fairly positive. But I do have some minor issues with it, which I'll discuss in this video. I also want to let you guys know I have not yet tackled the Wild Hunt expansion, nor the Skellige expansion. I have read through the rulebook of both those expansions several times, so I do understand what those expansions will bring. I just have not had a chance to table those two expansions yet. I played this game multiple times solo, and a few times at 3 and 4 players. With that being said, let's just dive into what I like and dislike about this game. Starting off, let's talk about the theme. Now, I find this game super thematic, down to all the different explore cards that you can discover and quest cards. There's tons of lore and jokes within those cards, and even how the rulebook is written. I love the fact how you win this game has to conclude in an epic battle, either with a witcher or a monster. And that just makes this game feel so epic. It just brings a really good, satisfying ending to the game. Now, if you don't know anything about this game, basically players are racing to collect 4 different trophies in order to win, and there are 3 different ways to win trophies. By defeating monsters, defeating another witcher or mage, and by meditating once you have the highest stat in one of your 4 stats. Combat, defense, alchemy, and your special. Now, mages have something else called wisdom instead of defense, but I'll talk about that later in this video. But no matter what, the game always ends in an epic battle, which I find super satisfying. Everything about this game and the theme just flows really nice with how you're playing your cards from your deck. If you're mages, you're casting powerful spells. Even down to all the different quests that you can go on, it just fits all well inside this world of The Witcher Old World. And I just love every bit of it. Okay, now let me bring up the first point, what I don't like about this game. This game says it is a 1 to 5 player count. I think that is a lie. If you're gonna play this game at 5 players, you better buckle up because you're looking at a 3 hour, maybe, if not more, probably closer to 4 if I'm being honest, playtime. And that is with everyone knowing all the rules and understanding what to do on their turn. I personally think a 3 player count for this game is perfect. It keeps player interactions high. You can say 4 is good as well. But with 5 players, there's definitely a lot more downtime between turns. There's not a lot of player interaction. When it comes to players' turns, once they understand the rules, they can take their turn while another player is doing their turn. For example, if someone ends their movement, another player can go on to their turn while that player goes into the next phase, which is the explore phase. Or even when they are buying cards, that next player can go straight into the move phase because it won't affect anything. And that way you're speeding up the game a bit more. And then a 3rd player, let's say if some player is fighting, that 3rd player can actually play as the monster. So they're always doing something, and another player can be taking another turn. So there's always at least could be 3 players involved at once during the gameplay. When you hit that 4th player, that 4th player is not really doing much. Maybe they could be betting to see who's gonna win the Witcher fight. But when it comes to that 5th player, they're just definitely sitting there doing nothing, waiting for their turn. Now, I never played at 5 players. I played at 4, but I can imagine at 5 players. With 4 players, we hit the 3 hour mark, and we were ready to be done the game. But yeah, The Witcher Old World, 5 players. Don't recommend it unless you're willing to play for hours on end. Still a great game though. Now, another thing I really love about this game has to be the combat and how you use your deck as your life pool. In this game, the deck that you're creating is your health in the game. So when you're fighting against your monster, you're using the deck that you have, and the monster has a deck that they have, and every card that you play to fight that monster counts technically as a hit point towards you. So you want to build the best combo of cards, the extension of those cards, in order to get the maximum amount of damage and hopefully defeat the monster before you run out of cards. And that's when the deck building comes into play, because you want to build your deck based off those different combos that you can create from your different extensions of those cards. And I love deck building games, and how you build your deck is so important in this game because this is going to determine how well you do when it comes to fighting monsters. And this game is all about fighting. So players must be very careful on what cards they choose to add to the deck. Combat works as follows in the game. When you enter a fight either with a witcher or a monster, you keep any cards remaining in your hand, you shuffle any discarded cards that's in your discard back into your deck, and flip it upside down. That is now your life pool. If you take any damage during the fight, you first lower your defense, Then you discard the top cards of your deck based off how much damage you take, and then cards in your hand. If you have no more cards left to discard in your hand, then you lose the fight. Here's an example of a card combo that you can play in the game. I have 3 cards in my hand and only 2 of them can actually be played together in an extension. In this combo, I do 2 damage to the monster, so the monster actually loses 2 cards from their deck. It just shows really how thematic this game actually is with that mechanic, because no matter what, the more cards that you play, the more health points you are technically losing, and that just shows that you're getting more tired as the fight drags on. Again, it's just super fun and makes for intense combat. So this brings me to another thing that I'm not the biggest fan that you can do in the game, and that is Witcher versus Witcher fighting. Now, there is no way to refuse a Witcher fight once a Witcher has engaged combat with you. And I feel like this can lead to some sour plays, especially if you lose combat. It kind of singles out that you are the weaker player, and this might make you a target for all the players to try to fight you in order to gain a trophy. Now keep in mind, I do think Witcher fights are fairly close. Most of the Witcher fights that I've had always come down to either 1 or 2 turns. Either the defending player was going to win or the active player was going to win. So it's always determined based off the last couple fight turns who is going to win the combat. So I do find them fairly close. But if you're in last place and you lose a Witcher fight, it's going to feel like impossible to come back from. And if you lose more than 1 Witcher fight, you kind of leave the game feeling like you didn't accomplish anything. Personally for me, I really enjoy the game. I don't mind Witcher versus Witcher fighting. I just don't think that it's for everybody. It is part of the competitive nature that this game does have to offer. I just know those are those types of players out there that much rather just focus on maybe going on quests and fighting monsters instead. And if that's the case, you may just want to focus on playing the Wild Hunt expansion. Now, something I absolutely love about this game is actually how easy it is to teach the players. It is honestly, once you get it set up and explain how everything works, it kind of clicks like that. Once they understand the different phases where you get to move around the board to discard cards, move into the explore, fight, or meditate phase, and then next move on to your buy phase. The most complicated thing I think is understanding on how to combo your cards when you're building your deck. Plus, one thing I was confused about was the trail tokens. I wasn't too sure how that worked. I couldn't find much about the rulebook. It actually took a video for me to understand how that part worked. But once you get all that, it's very easy to flow and for players to understand what they need to do in order to win. Nothing overall is too complex, and you can slowly add other things from other expansions as you want, especially when it comes to the Monster Trail expansion, which is the must in my opinion, where you can add different things such as the mutagen cards, which are more bonus abilities that you can do, bomb cards, which are super powerful when it comes to fighting, especially those harder monsters that they add in that expansion. And you can play without potions or add potions, have both potions and bombs. It's very customizable and very easy to follow in the rulebook, which I think is fantastic. I love the fact that you can make the monsters harder to fight as well. The Monster Trail also adds weakness tokens, which, if I can grab one here, you can hunt these down in order to find a monster's weakness. Again, fantastic. It's not overly all complex, especially once you play the base game. It's easier to add new stuff, and it doesn't seem overwhelming at all. With that being said though, if you're somebody that's only interested in the base game, I highly recommend definitely picking up the Monster Trail expansion. I feel like the base game is more for like entry-level gamers and just want a casual experience with the game, play it, fight a few monsters, and kind of be done with it. But if you're somebody that's looking for more of a challenge and to increase the difficulty, which I feel like is how you're going to enjoy this game even more, the Monster Trail expansion is a must-have in my opinion. After my first playthrough, I just craved for more. I added that Monster Trail expansion right away, and it made the game 10 times better in my opinion. Now, something I'm also not a huge fan of when it comes to Witcher Old World is the dice that come with the game. The fact that dice poker is kind of a main mechanic in the game where it's one of the best ways to gain gold. I mean, hopefully you can gain gold from it. But with the 5 and the 6 on these dice, it is so hard to take a look at it and judge if you have a pair or 3 of a kind because of how close the 5 and the 6 look together. It requires a double take to make sure that you have the hand of poker that you want when it comes to rolling those dice. Sometimes you might think you have 3 of a kind, or sometimes you might only have a pair. It requires that double look on the dice, and it's not obviously the biggest deal, but for somebody that didn't want to pay for the upgraded dice, which are easier to read, it's a little bit annoying, especially when dice poker is such a big factor in the game when you want to gain some gold and you want to roll those dice and you can't quite tell what you have. Again, not the biggest game breaker there is. I just wish we got better dice in the game. They still roll fine, they look great. I just wish they were a little bit easier to read. Now, I love the personal touch that the designers added to this game. And what I mean by that is all the different unique abilities that the mages and witches that you can choose from.
And having the ability to change their names.
Now, how the mages use their cards, they actually have to use energy in order to play powerful spell cards to do a lot of damage. So the cards can hit monsters for a lot more damage. However, on the flip side of that, they don't really have a lot of defense. They have something that's called wisdom and energy, which is different from the defense and shield levels of witchers. So even though they can do a lot of damage, they can actually take a lot of damage as well. When it comes to witchers, they actually have a shield level they reduce over the mages, where they really don't have a lot of defense that they can use. They can only use protection on certain cards that they add to the deck. And the mages can do a lot more damage than the witches can, but it's going to cost them energy off their board. So they do have quite a bit of different playstyles between the witches and mages, which I think is a great way to change up the game if you're getting sick of playing as witchers, and adds more playable characters. Bringing me to my next point, which is something that I dislike about the game, is actually with all the unique abilities, I do find that it's hard to balance them all to be fair. So some powers feel like they're more powerful than others. For example, if I'm playing as the Witcher from the Viper, he has the ability to look at the top cards of your opponent's deck, monsters or mages or witchers, and choose a card to discard. The only problem with that is when you're doing that to another player, they're likely to have a card in the hand that lets them draw that card back up. So in other words, you're helping that player out if you discard one of their powerful cards. There's certain symbols on cards that allow you either to draw from your discard, return cards back to your hand, and even draw more cards for your next fight phase. It kind of just defeats the purpose of using your special ability. Now granted, it comes with a secondary effect where you can reorder the top cards of your opponent's deck, which is quite powerful because you don't want them to draw their better cards sooner. And it's also really powerful when it comes to monsters because, let's face it, you don't want the top card to cause you a lot of damage. So sometimes it just feels like your character is not as great as others, but I understand that it's kind of hard to get a bunch of different abilities to balance right. And if that's the case, next time you play, just pick a different character. There's tons to choose from, tons of great abilities. Again, just think about what ability you want to use, and maybe if you don't want to focus on your specialty anyways, which is what makes that ability better, you can always focus on combat, defense, and your alchemy, and you'll be good to go, or wisdom if you're playing as a mage. Now, my final thing that I'm going to mention about The Witcher Old World that I really enjoy about it is I think it has a really good solo mode. However, I'm only talking about the solo mode when it comes to the Legendary Hunt expansion, not the base game. So let me talk about the base game first, because that's the one that I kind of dislike, and that is what I'm including for my 5 dislikes, is the base game solo mode. Now, I don't think the solo mode in the base game is overly that bad, and if you're a solo player, you might actually probably enjoy it versus playing with other players. Personally, for me though, it just doesn't offer anything new versus if I was playing with other players. With this solo mode, you're racing to gain the 4 trophies that you need in order to win in the least amount of turns. And in order to be the best witcher possible, you actually have to do it in under 6 turns. Which if you do that, that's insane. You are considered to be a legend, and if you do, let me know. I would love to see the gameplay, because I would almost say that's impossible to beat the game in 6 moves or less. Now that brings me to the solo mode that I personally enjoy, and that is the Legendary Hunt expansion. Now how this one is different from the base game is there is a new big bad monster on the board. There's tons to choose from. You get to choose which one you want to fight against. And it's going to be moving around the board, leaving behind these different destruction tokens that you're trying to collect so it weakens him, the monster, by the time you want to go fight it. And you're not really gaining trophies as much in this version. You are, but it's not necessary in order to win the game. The more trophies you earn, it lowers the monster's shield level. So as an example, if you go to defeat it for 3 damage and you don't have any trophies, then its shield level is at 3 and it takes no damage. However, if you gain at least 1 trophy, then its shield level is at 2, and that way if you fight it and you do 3 damage, then it takes 1 damage, and so on and so forth. So it is important to try to level up before you end up fighting the monster. And this one is still kind of turn-based in the sense that there is a movement location deck that the monster uses at the end of every one of your turns. You flip over, it determines where the monster is going to move around on the board and how many times. The goal of the game is to defeat the monster. It doesn't really matter how many turns you do it in, as long as the monster's movement deck doesn't run out by the time you go to defeat it. So it just feels more fulfilling going around the board, completing different objectives like fighting monsters to get an extra ability, getting a trophy from it, going around training up your stats so you're strong enough to fight the monster, so you're able to maybe draw more cards when you fight the monster. And that way the game ends in this epic fight against this epic monster, and it just feels so satisfying when you defeat it. Now keep in mind you can play this with other players, but I feel like this is the better solo mode than the base game. Keep in mind you can challenge yourself even more by adding in the Monster Trail expansion, which I highly recommend. It's definitely an essential expansion that I think is required to get the most out of this game. And speaking about solo mode, I will have a solo gameplay of this game on the channel relatively soon, so make sure you all subscribed and hit the bell so you don't miss out on that one. And keep in mind, this video was my own personal thoughts and opinions. If you played The Witcher or World, let me know what you guys like and dislike about it as well. Until the next video, I'll catch you guys later. Take care.